welcome to the Albuquerque Journal Midweek Blitz High School Football Show with your hosts, James Yodice and Geoff Grammer. This show is sponsored by Western New Mexico University.
Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Geoff Grammer with the Albuquerque Journal, and this is the Midweek Blitz, our weekly high school football show. Week 7 now as we record this, and I am joined, as always, by our preps guru, James Yodice. James, welcome.
Jeffrey, good to see you. Are we talking Alamogordo today, bro?
We should be talking Alamogordo.
That was a rhetorical question, by the way. We're not.
We could be singing Alamogordo fight song anytime you want. One of these shows before the end of the season, I'm going to be singing the Alamogordo High School fight song for James.
I can live with that.
James will walk off.
James will definitely walk off.
A heavy news week. Before we get into some games and some top performances of the week, there's been a lot going on in week 7 or in the past week for high school sports in general. And I wanted to kind of start with a story that was actually in today's journal as we record this on Tuesday. It was on the front page of today's journal. Real quick, participation numbers in football since COVID have gone up nationwide and in New Mexico in particular.
Yeah, this was something I discovered during all my preseason work back in August, getting ready for the season. And I was surprised maybe by the number of coaches who told me. Usually when I'm interviewing coaches for my season preview story, I'll usually ask them about numbers. How are your numbers? And I was actually surprised by the number of coaches who said not only were they up, but by a pretty good number. And of course, this is not for everyone, but I was interested to discover that a good number of schools had more athletes out than they've had in recent years. And of course, we had the pandemic, which really threw everything off kilter, obviously, in all sports, and created such a ruckus, not just at the high school level, but at the college level too. But it looks like numbers are rebounding, especially in football, which is good. The concussion issue,
right,
seemed to be a thing in terms of numbers going down a bit, trending down a bit. But it looks like we've reversed that. At least in the short term. I don't know if this is a long-term thing, but we've reversed that here just over the last 2 years as we're coming out of the pandemic.
In terms of the participation numbers kind of dipping.
Yeah, and we're over 1 million nationwide, the highest number it's been, I think, in about a decade or so nationwide. So, yeah, I think we're seeing more healthy numbers. That's good. Football's the highest participation sport we have in preps by a long margin over anybody else. Track and field probably be the second one. Yeah, good to see the numbers rebounding, and we'll see over the next 2 or 3 years whether it still continues to trend that way.
There's a couple legs I want to kind of stand on with the story. Is one being that I found it interesting in a reader comment, which on Facebook, we welcome your comments, of course, at all times, and reader comments on social media can certainly go one direction or the other often, but this was a good one, I thought, and I thought it shows an interesting juxtaposition between the participation numbers of players increasing in football while the participation number in officials across the state of New Mexico, in football in particular, but really all sports, people just don't want to be officials anymore. What can you say to that?
Look, it's a struggle that's been going on for at least a decade, I would say, maybe longer than that. Football, a couple of athletic directors told me that the NMAA asked pretty much all its school districts or individual schools to give up at least one Friday home game during the course of the school year. I don't know if this is 100% true, but I've had this repeated to me several times. To move a game either to Thursday or Saturday in order to accommodate the lack of officials. That way there might be more games on a Thursday and there might be more games on a Saturday. Of course, Friday night is a pretty hellacious night for officials.
Right, spread out the games obviously allows to spread out the officiating crews.
Right. Now, this is just what I was told by a couple of athletic directors. I have not spoken to the NMA directly about this, so I'm not reporting it as fact. I'm just relaying what a couple of athletic directors told me, that they were, in essence, asked to surrender a Friday home game whenever they could to help out with officiating. So that is a good illustration. I'll tell you something else anecdotally. The daughter of Rio Rancho High School's basketball coach, whose name is Wally Salata, his daughter's name is Allie, who I covered as an athlete at Rio Rancho. Right. She was a state champion athlete. She joined officiating this year. I remember I ran into her early in the season at the La Cueva Cleveland game, and she stopped. She came over and said hello, and she had said she had become a football official, even though she didn't know much about the sport, and said she was working her first varsity game the next day. this is her first year. Usually there's a window officials have to work. Now, this wasn't a very big game, I don't think.
Right.
It was a varsity game at a much lower level, not a somewhere in the 3A to 6A
Points the
level.
same, though, right? I mean,
and she was telling me she was going to work a varsity game the next day, and she had never officiated before. So that is a good illustration. And I'm hoping to write anecdotally about this coming up in the next week or two, but that gives you an idea of how few officials the state has.
Right.
One thing I'm always constantly amazed at is the Southeast region has fewer officials, where football is such a king.
It's big.
Actually has fewer officials than you would think, given how much of a football-rich region that is. But, yeah, officiating continues to be a problem, not just in football. Let's make that clear. This is not just a football issue. I come across this in soccer quite a bit too. Games having to be shuffled around from one day to the next, to a Monday, to a Wednesday, which are usually days that we don't see a lot of soccer. Tuesday and Thursday are big days for soccer. Saturday as well.
I know we've had in the past two longtime freelancer, Glenn Rosales, who would officiate some soccer matches sometimes. He told me times when they would start soccer matches in the morning, he would do 3-4 games in a row sometimes.
Which is absurd.
Yeah.
You can't expect kids to be playing that many games, and you certainly couldn't expect officials to be running around a pitch for that many games in a single day. 2 would be a lot to ask.
Yeah.
Let alone more than 2. I assume that's probably an extremely rare instance, but yeah.
And whether or not he was talking in that instance about high school games or in the club season, he might have been talking about that. But I know he did both.
Look,
and
it's an issue.
The point's the same.
It's an issue, right? Soccer's an issue. Football's an issue. I can't speak to volleyball, but those two sports, soccer and football, are definitely they're in that window where, boy, it's hard to schedule sometimes on days that are heavy with games because you may not have enough crews to get to all the games you want to. A lot of times you'll see out at the EPS complex, they'll assign crews to multiple games, one at maybe 11 o'clock, one at 1 o'clock or 1:30, which is why they stagger starts so you can get crews on multiple games.
2 things then. One, I'm going to ask you how people can get involved, but also I will do the good old fashioned, remember this when you're at a game. Like if you're a parent, if you're a fan, it's one thing to have give the officials a hard time. They blow every call. Haha, we get it. It's another thing when it's actually starting to affect games, and it is starting to affect games in the state of New Mexico. They don't have enough officials, so keep the ribbing of the guys in stripes and girls in stripes to a minimum, because it is actually starting to affect the games. But what can people do to get involved?
I would tell them they should contact Zach Stevenson, who is the director or the commissioner of officials for the New Mexico Activities Association. Zach's a good guy. Track him down at the NMAA offices. If you want to become an official, that's where you should start. And he can get anyone, man or woman, young, older, if you're looking to supplement your income, whatever. He would gladly get you involved. Whatever sport you're interested in, he'll get you involved.
And you're not going to be retiring early by being an official, but you get compensated. This isn't a purely volunteer kind of gig.
Man, the good officials can make a pretty good chunk of change on the side from their day jobs, which of course is the thing I think most people forget. These guys are all, these men and women they all have regular jobs, most of them anyway, and they're having to fit the officiating in with their regular jobs and talking to their supervisors and bosses. Hey, I need to take off so I can go do this or that. So, these people are working pretty hard. They already have a regular job to put food on the table, and they're doing this to supplement. Many of them do it because they love sports and they want to contribute, like Ali Salata, who I just mentioned. She's wanting to give back. That's great. We need a lot more people like her, whether it's former athletes or just people that want to get involved because they want to see the kids have enough officials so they can play their games.
All right, moving along. Not necessarily a game on the field per se just yet. We'll get to those, of course, but some more that affect the game. Some more news. The NMAA this week had some realignment. I guess not news, but could be some news soon.
Right. So the NMAA had its first board. They have 4 board meetings during a school year. The first one was last week, which I sat in on. One of the things that's going to come up at the next board meeting, which is the last week in November, the week after the state football championship games are over, is they're going to vote on the next realignment and classification. But one of the things that's likely to happen, I don't want to say for sure it's going to happen, but it's pretty clear that it's coming up, is the NMAA in football only wants to create larger districts, large super districts, a little bit like like we see in college football.
Right. I mean, if you look at the college football landscape right now, anybody who follows college football knows what's been going on, where conferences are growing from 8, 9, 10 teams to 16 team conferences and growing like that way.
Right. So here's a good example. Class 5A football has 16 teams exactly. 8 are in the north, 8 are in the south. Now, there are still some schools that have to be determined in terms of where they're going to be placed in what classification based on their enrollment. So at the moment, Class 5A has 16 teams. 8 of them are here in the northern half, meaning Belen and North, and the other 8 are in the southern half. Hypothetically, you could see those separated into 2 districts down the road. Now, this wouldn't necessarily work for everyone. Like Class 4A football, I think also has 16 teams, but it's heavy on the north. Many more teams in the northern half than the southern half, which has teams like Portales, Lovington, Silver, schools like that. But a majority of the teams are actually in this part of the state, the northern half of the state. That would be a little trickier. But I think what we're going to see larger districts coming starting in 2024. 7, 8 teams. They want to help schools with their scheduling, scheduling outside their district. And by making larger districts, that means that's fewer games they're going to have to schedule as non-district games, and a lot of schools apparently have trouble with this, and this is one of the corrective measures they're looking at to make scheduling easier. You'd have so instead of having 3 or 4 district games, now you may have 5, 6, 7 district games. The largest district we have now is 6, which is the Las Cruces, Centennial, Oregon Mountain, Alamogordo, Carlsbad, Hobbs district. That is the largest district in the state. That is 6. That would be a small district, I think, going forward. Like I said, it looks like the NMAA board of directors is going to vote on this in November at their next meeting. It's not 100% sure, but it looks like that's where we're headed.
Obviously, the trickle down there would be, there'd be a lot of trickle down effect of what that would mean, but how the playoff structure would be set up would be a little bit different. Is it still the automatic first and second? That kind of stuff will get ironed out.
And actually, right now, it's actually for a while now, it's only been the district champion getting in. So if we go to larger districts, and they're looking at doing this in all classifications, so from 2A to 6A in the 11-man and for 8-man and 6-man, we're talking about larger districts across the board is what they're looking at. So that would reduce the number of automatic qualifiers that we have in prep football, as opposed to in like Class 5A we were talking about as an example. They have 4 districts with 4 teams each. You have 4 automatic qualifiers.
Everyone else
if we cut that in half, we would reduce in half the number of automatic qualifiers. We would go from 4 to 2. That would mean more at-large berths. How it might impact a playoff scenario, too early to say yet until we actually see the structure and how that pans out. But it's going to look different, I think, going forward, starting in 2024. Like I said, I believe that's where we're headed with the board of directors in November for the next 2-year block, 2024 and 2025 football seasons.
All right. This is the Midweek Blitz. It is a high school football show. I'm going to get a little more specific into football here. Those following the Albuquerque Journal coverage on abqjournal.com know, and those who follow the print edition for years know that every year at the midseason point, you put out your grades and you do a midseason report card. I'm not going to go over every team for the metro area, but you did give out this year just 2 A's and no teams below a C.
No team below C minus. I just don't believe in putting. I used to do it D's and F's, and I realized I didn't need to do it that way. So I amended it a few years ago. So now C minus is the lowest grade I will give to anybody.
I will point out though that these 2 C minuses this year, you did give 2 of them, and 2 teams that are kind of actually near and dear to your heart. One you pointed out was near and dear to your heart just because you're kind of rooting for them. It sounds like, and then one you went to. Who were your 2 C minuses?
Yeah, that would be Cibola, which is winless. Rio Grande, which is just it would take too long to document all the struggles they have had trying to get coaches, trying to get kids. They've been playing as an independent for a few years. They haven't even been in a football district for, I think, about 5 years now. So, yeah, that's a program I really would love to see get turned around. And, I've been at this job long enough. I've seen Rio Grande be competitive in football, maybe not for long stretches, but in short bursts. I've seen them be competitive and get into the playoffs. I think they made it to the semifinals one year. So it can be done. Now, of course, everything has changed. Those are back in the years when there was no Atrisco heritage, siphoning students away from them. But it can be done. I don't know how it gets done, but I hope it does. And Siebel, of course, it's just a struggle this year. And on top of which, one of their best players I think, left for Arizona because he's a potential Division I basketball prospect. Marcus Wilson, I think, he left the program.
Would have helped, obviously.
Would have helped, obviously, because he was probably their best overall athlete. He left because he's focusing on basketball. You can't really begrudge him that. So, yeah, hard to assign those C-minuses, but in this case, they were warranted. Now, as far as my A students, Bernalillo had an A grade. They were the only one with a pure A grade. They're 6-0. They're coming off a good road win against Taos last week. They've got Los Alamos coming into town this week, which unfortunately is not going to be the 6-0 versus 6-0 matchup I had hoped. Because
we'll touch on that in a little bit too.
And Legacy Academy, an 8-man program, which is only in its second year. I gave them an A- grade. They've only got one loss. They've got road wins against Tatum and last week against Mesilla Valley, two teams that are both ranked in the top 5, as they are. In 8-man, they have come a long way. I mean, a long way really fast. As a matter of fact, this is going to be their last year in 8-man. They're almost certainly going to go up into 2A football next year. Their numbers are strong. They've got like about 30 kids in the program, which is a lot for an 8-man program. So their coach, Brian Clampett, has told me repeatedly over the last year or so that they're shooting to become an 11-man program starting in 2024. I think that's probably where they're headed. So I think they're going to get in their licks now. Manal's in their district as well, and Manal's having a really good season. But Legacy looks like the best team in that district, and they look like a legitimate challenger, maybe to make it into the semifinals. I don't know if they're ready to take that real next step and win a state title, but they are really competitive and they're really impressive.
As you noted, they're only in year 2, so there are people listening to this podcast who may be regular high school football fans in the state that might not even be aware that Legacy Academy even exists. So
I would guarantee that.
It is interesting to hear that they're doing so well so early. We're going to get to some district preview real quick. We're going to have to rapid fire this a little bit. But we are now starting district play pretty much everywhere at this point.
Yes.
So let's do it. What's the quick overview you can give on the district?
Okay.
outlook?
So for the larger classes, district play is getting into it this week. I think 5A doesn't start until next week because they have smaller districts. So in the 6A districts, District 1 this week we have Cleveland and Volcano Vista playing, which is a huge matchup on the west side on Friday night. We have La Cueva and El Dorado in that district playing on Friday night. And El Dorado's a dangerous team. They're really young on defense and they're untested, but their offense is really good. La Cueva's starting to heat up a bit. So we've got that district starting to heat up. We have another game in that district on Saturday morning between West Mesa and Sandia. And to me, that's one of the really interesting things about the whole second half of the year is if you assume that La Cueva wins this district, and I think that's fair to assume, who finishes second in this district? I've seen all the other 4 teams, Farmington, El Dorado, West Mesa, Sandia. Hard to say. Yeah. It's really hard to say. It's going to be a real scrum between those 4 over the next few weeks. So those 2 districts are getting underway. District 5, 6A is getting started as well. Las Lunas, who's the favorite in that district, is playing Capital this week. Albuquerque High has a big road game at Clovis. That's a team, Albuquerque High, they're feisty. I don't know if they're quite ready to beat Clovis. You never know. Those 2 schools have had a couple of tremendous games over the last several years. Second place is kind of up for grabs in that district, which might mean potentially a playoff berth down the road. That district's been largely a one-bid league of late. And somebody's going to have to play pretty well to get a second bid out of that league, assuming Las Lunas takes care of business, and I think they will. So, we got the upper divisions starting district play this week. Las Cruces and Hobbs is a good matchup in the Southern District. Those are 2 teams that both have playoff aspirations and could very well make it. So, for the next 5 weeks, the larger districts. And then starting next week, 5A, 4A, we'll start to see some of the smaller classifications get into their district schedules.
Education and training at Western New Mexico University is accessible from every corner of the land of enchantment, providing limitless opportunities toward success for more than a century. And now, through the New Mexico Opportunity Scholarship, tuition and fees are covered for anyone looking to start or start over. Along with free tuition, books are always included for every WNMU student, assuring your only worry is how far you can actually go. Lift off toward your future and endless potential at WNMU today.
All right, now let's look back briefly at what happened last week. Obviously, we're looking ahead at the district outlook as you just did. We'll look ahead at the games this weekend that are important in just a minute. But first, I want to kind of go back to last week, a little rapid fire as we go here. Wasn't a huge slate of important games, but there were some bullet points that are worth mentioning.
Yeah, Cleveland got beat 35-0 by Friendship, Texas. Friendship's a really good Texas team. Now, these two schools had a really close game last year. Cleveland's just not the team they were last year. We all know this. They're still, when they're healthy, which they're not, they're still probably the best team because they've already beaten La Cueva and Centennial, both of them by 20 points, roughly. So Cleveland's still the class of 6A, even though they're 3-3, and it looks weird to see them with a 500 record. And that was their first time being shut out in, I think, 11 years by anybody. I think Rio Rancho was the last one to do it. So we'll see how they respond against Volcano Vista this week. Volcano Vista's got a good defense. Cleveland still has a tremendous defense. Academy went up to Los Alamos and beat Los Alamos 14-6. Great win for the Chargers, who are now 4-2. Los Alamos was 5-0. Now they're 5-1. That's a great win. For David Lee, their Academy's new head coach. And that's a really good defensive team. And I'm going to see them for the first time on Thursday night. They play St. Pius on Thursday night. This will be my first look at both of those teams. So Academy, unfortunately, is in that district with Portales and Lovington and Bernalillo, which is just an insanely competitive district. You're talking about 4 of the best 7 or 8 teams in 4A.
Well, that might be a team that would benefit from an expanded kind of conference situation or district, rather.
Most definitely. Yeah, so Los Alamos wasn't the only undefeated team that got beat last week. Dexter was also at home and got beat by Robertson pretty handily, actually. I believe it was 42-14, I think, ultimately, although that game was reasonably close for a while. So Dexter is now falls from the rank of the undefeated teams in 3A. Los Alamos, I think, was one of only 3 teams in 5A that were undefeated. Artesia and Roswell are the other 2, and those 2 are on a collision course. I believe they play Friday the 13th in October.
That's going to be fun.
Yeah, boy, what a tremendous game that will be. So we lost 2 undefeated teams with Los Alamos and Dexter, and of course Bernalillo, we mentioned they won on the road 20-14 at Taos, a close game, and they've won 5 of their 6 games. Bernalillo has won by 8 points or fewer, so they're winning close games. That's a sign of a good team, I think, and they've beaten several pretty good teams along the way. So we're going to see coming up, not just Los Alamos, but when they get into play Lovington, Bernalillo, and Academy, we're going to see that defense is going to be asked to do a lot.
That's why they earned your A. They're still undefeated.
They're my valedictorian.
Yeah.
They're not the best football team in the metro area. Of course not. They're probably not even the 8th or 10th best football team. But they're the only undefeated team, and they keep grinding out wins impressively. So, yeah, they become my valedictorian this year.
You play to win the game.
That's exactly right.
Our stars of the week, as we ask every week, we ask you to let us know, obviously, about what performers are doing well and statistically so, to let James know by Saturday afternoon, so you could be one of our nominees for High School Star of the Week. And James every week nominates the High School Stars of the Week based on performance. Statistics heavy, obviously, but not necessarily only statistically based kind of nominations. If it was a key enough play or whatever the storyline may be, they can certainly be nominated. And James puts this list together every week. I'm going to give you a rundown right now of last week's Stars of the Week. The top 3 I will single out as receiving the most votes at 10% or more, but the others who were nominated and did receive votes, I mean, we're still getting, as I've mentioned before, we're still getting thousands of votes on this poll every week. Communities around the state and high school communities within the metro area are certainly getting involved, and we encourage you to do so as well. Marquise Renfro, senior wide receiver from Atrisco Heritage. Elijah Gonzalez, senior running back from Volcano Vista. Alex Lopez, a junior quarterback from Highland. Frankie Gaindo, who's a junior running back from Artesia, who's been on this list, I think, almost every week this year. This
is at least his 3rd time on there.
Yeah, his name is a regular, it seems like, here. And Angelo Molina, senior running back from Del Norte. All were nominated. I will single out now our top 3 vote getters this week. JJ Ariano, junior quarterback from Rio Rancho. He was smooth and mostly efficient Friday night as the Rams downed Farmington 48-28. He was 25 for 35 for 348 yards, 4 touchdowns, and a home victory. In second place in our vote getting, in the readers' vote getting on the poll, Andres Lazos, junior running back from Grants. The Pirates' diminutive back went off Friday night against Kirtland Central, rushing for 333 yards on 18 carries and 4 touchdowns. Grants beat the Broncos 54-42. He received 29.1% of the votes. Good to see a community like Grants so involved in this online poll. And the winner, Lorenzo Urban Sophomore quarterback, Legacy Academy. You mentioned them earlier. The Silverbacks quarterback was instrumental in their huge 64-36 road win Saturday at Mesilla Valley, rushing for 147 yards while also throwing for 351 yards and 6 touchdowns, receiving 41% of the vote. As you can see, a school's community or a whole community can get behind a nominee. So we encourage you to look every week online at the Albuquerque Journal. Any other individual performances or any comments about our individual stars of the week that you want to offer?
No, I think we hit. I think we hit the ones that I'm interested in.
I know you. Obviously, I will repeat. Are the one who nominates these players every week. So these are probably it's hard to sneak one by when you're the guy nominating them. But anybody who coaches, parents who want James to be aware of this need to let him know by Saturday afternoon so it can be on our poll by Saturday evening, and then it really picks up steam on Sundays when it goes online then.
Yeah, so I'm trying my best to get the word out, especially on social media, to let them know, hey, look, you got a kid that did well, give me their numbers. I can't 100% promise they'll be on the list, but I know for sure they won't be on the list if I don't know what they did.
Absolutely.
So give me their numbers as best you can. And we're getting a lot of different communities involved. I still think we can do better. I'm still going to keep attempting to get more involved with more schools and just let them know this is what we're doing, and just get me your information.
Time to get some Alamogordo Tigers on this list.
Yeah,
all right?
hey, look, we'll put an Alamogordo Tiger on there.
All right, let's look ahead at the top games of this week. Real rapid fire here again.
Yeah, so we talked about this a little bit earlier, so I won't get too much into it. Cleveland and Volcano Vista, a District 1 matchup in 6A. That's Friday night. Should be a fantastic game. La Cueva and El Dorado, which is a great rivalry, probably the best rivalry in the city among two city teams. In Albuquerque, anyway. That's Friday night. That's a District 2 opener. Los Alamos and Bernalillo, that's still a great matchup. 5-1 Los Alamos in a 5A team. Bernalillo 6-0 as a 4A team. Boy, that's going to be a really, really fun matchup. Sandia West Mesa I talked about. Sandia's great defense against West Mesa quarterback Elijah Brody. We're going to see how that pans out on Saturday. That's a game I think that's even more important for Sandia than they might think. We have a great matchup between Texaco and Yodice. Two teams in Class 2A that are ranked number 1 and number 2, part of the same district. I think that district has 4 of the top 6 teams in Class 2A. So that is going to be a tremendous amount of fun. Texaco has been the best team, but there are some other good teams. Yodice, Jal, Santa Rosa. There's some Jal. So there's some really good teams to watch out for.
The Artesia Roswell game you've been saying, the kind of collision course
exactly.
They're hitting it a little earlier. Yeah,
and speaking of Roswell, they've got a game up in Farmington against Piedra Vista. Piedra Vista's won a couple in a row. They're starting to find their footing a little bit, but Roswell's just been a juggernaut. Both them and Artesia have just been clearly above the rest of the Class 5A division so far. Is somebody else out there capable of beating them? Hard to say. Goddard or Mayfield or Piedra Vista, hard to say. Those two look like they've gained such separation over the rest. But this is a good road test for Roswell, having said that, because Roswell's beaten 5 6A teams in a row. Jeez. Not necessarily elite teams, but they've beaten up on Carlsbad and Clovis and Hobbs. Yeah. So just for 3 examples. So they are playing extremely good football. So this is a good matchup.
All right, let's put a bow on it. A lot of, I guess, not game-specific content, but we covered a lot of ground this week. And before we sign off here, anything else non-football related you want to touch on?
Yeah, real quick, the La Cueva volleyball team, which hasn't lost a match in about 2 years, they're headed to the Phoenix area this weekend for a tournament of champions, in essence, which is going to have about 90 teams at 3 different levels. I'm not sure which level La Cueva is going to be at. Their coach, Steve Archibald, wasn't sure yet where they were going to be placed. But this long winning streak that La Cueva has, I believe it's 54 or 55 matches. As we're recording this, they're playing tonight. They're going to face their best tests that they've ever faced. La Cueva's won state the last 2 years. So we'll see. They get out of the Phoenix trip without having lost another match this year. That will be super impressive. But this is the best competition this program will ever have faced at the high school level. A lot of these kids play, club volleyball, and they see these kids and they travel during the off season. But in terms of La Cueva's high school program, best competition they have ever faced will be this weekend.
Very good. James, thank you so much. That is another edition of the Midweek Blitz, for our high school football content. If you like this podcast, let us know. You can get James Yodice at jyodice@abqjournal.com. You can get him on X, formerly known as Twitter, at James D. Yodice. And you can get me at ggrammar@abqjournal.com or on Twitter, or X, formerly known as Twitter, at Geoff Grammer. Hope you're enjoying this podcast. Every Wednesday, episodes drop. We also have another one on the Albuquerque Journal Podcast Network, and that's Talking Grammar. A lot more Lobo-specific, UNM-specific, that comes out every Tuesday. Hope you're enjoying all of this. And remember, with the Albuquerque Journal, you can get us online, all our content at abqjournal.com. And with the podcast, remember, read, hear, watch.